Hey everyone, I'm Amethescent, and I made a horror visual novel in 30 days. If you've been a fan of my channel for a while, you may be a bit confused as I already have a few projects that I'm meant to be working on. A Five Nights at Freddy's fan game and a Creepydrasta series. I'm still working on both, but I was honestly getting quite burnt out. And as much as I want to push on and finish those projects, I really needed a break. And the last thing I want is to rush out half-baked projects. So I took on this 30-day challenge. Week 1. Coming into this, I was really excited to get started. I already had an idea that I was excited about. And when I did start, I quickly decided to make it into a horror game in my Creepydrasta art style, which may or may not be partially due to the fact that I haven't posted a Creepydrasta video in 8 months. My basic idea was to have two sisters who have to somehow work together to get through a scary environment. Very vague. But I knew I would need a monster. And something I like to do when designing monsters is to go to yokai.com. Yokai.com is a website that, as the name states, has a lot of information about Japanese yokai. There are quite a lot of creepy ones, and I love it. Although some of them are a bit weird. So that's exactly what I did. I began searching through yokai.com, using the random yokai feature. I found quite a few interesting ones, but none really inspired me in the way I wanted. I also looked on Pinterest since there are a lot of cool designs on there too. Eventually, I came across the Shinigami. In the simplest terms, a Shinigami is similar to the Western Grim Reaper. Though, from my research, there are quite a few interpretations out there as to what a Shinigami is. The word comes from the kanji shi, which means death, and the kanji kami, which means god. So, death god is what it means literally. But from my research, Shinigami aren't typically gods, but more like spirits. Some stories interpret them as impartial spirits that take away spirits of those who died. Others, such as yokai.com, interpret them as spirits that possess and harm the living and target those who are dying. For my monster, I took more inspiration from the latter, but I like the idea of having multiple death spirits in the world of my game, with some being more on the evil side and most being impartial. And that, combined with the references I found on Pinterest, gave me a pretty good idea of what I wanted my monster to be like. So, I took a lot of inspiration from Shinigamis, but I also took inspiration from other stuff. I didn't want it to just have one look, so I gave it the ability to shapeshift. I also named it Shin, which is another Japanese word that means cause of death. It's not a Japanese name per se, but I'm thinking it's akin to Death from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Death isn't a name in English, but it still works due to the nature of the character. I don't know. I'm not Japanese, and I'm not proficient in the language, but I'm hoping it's okay. Next, I worked on the characters. As I mentioned before, I wanted the game to be about two sisters. What I didn't mention was that I wanted them to be kind of opposites, at least in visuals, specifically light versus dark. And from that, I began to have some ideas for their personalities. Firstly, we have Amelia, the dark one. I thought it would be cool to design a character who was a bit more on the goth side, and I rationalized this with her backstory. Amelia can see demons, ghosts, spirits, and anything else like that. She has been able to see them since she was very, very young. And being forced to see all these dark and demonic creatures every day made her a bit edgy. As for her sister, Mallory, she wasn't as unlucky as Amelia and grew up relatively normal, with the exception of having a sister that believes in demons. I designed her with a lot of light colors. I wanted to make her hair light too, but she already looked so different from her sister, so I made her hair black instead. And finally, we have Sosuke. If you couldn't tell by his name, he's Japanese. I can't really go too far into him and his personality without spoiling things, but just know that he's Amelia's best and only friend. Designing all three was fun, though I struggled a lot with getting Amelia's design right. It just looked so wrong. But after redrawing different parts of her several times, I landed on something I was really happy with. Her design is easily my second favorite of all the characters in the game. Next, I worked on planning the story, which was rough. I won't go too much into it because of spoilers, but it was annoying. This is always my least favorite part of the game design process. I love writing, but I am a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to planning my stories, so sometimes it's hard to come up with a plot that I like. I was getting pretty discouraged, especially since it was coming up on the end of the first week. Which brings me to something I haven't mentioned yet. At the beginning of this challenge, I planned out what I wanted to get done at the end of each week. At the end of the first week, I planned to finish research, plotting, and character designs. So at this point, it was near the end of the week, and I wasn't even close to finishing planning the story. I was feeling discouraged, but after a talk with my brother, I set a few rules for myself. First, I stopped caring so much about it being perfect. Second, I choose a fixed number of events and focus on that. And third, I don't force myself to try to fit a square peg into a round hole. And with those rules in place, I was able to finish plotting. I also sketched some design ideas for Sheen using some of the entries from yokai.com as inspiration. Design-wise, at least. I was basically just sketching out a few ideas quickly. My favorite version of Sheen that was designed has to be this one. I think it's one of the creepiest of them all. I especially like the twisting smile and the long stretching neck. This is a horror design I've wanted to do for a long time, but was deterred by the fact that Little Nightmares 2 has a pretty similar design. But I just like the idea so much. And I think my monster is different enough to not be a carbon copy. As for the other designs, I guess you'll just have to play the game to see them. Week 2. For week 2, I had several large goals. Those goals were writing the script, proofreading, and drawing all the backgrounds. For the writing, since I had 4 major sections, my goal was to write 1 section per day. Or 1 chapter, as I called it. Though the game didn't really have any actual chapters. There isn't really much to say about it other than I wrote, and wrote, and wrote. If you count correctly, if 1 chapter is written a day, there are only 4 chapters, and there are 7 days in a week, then I would be done 3 days early, which gave me plenty of time to read through the chapters and make any edits or adjustments that I felt were needed. This includes adding in more details or narration, reducing redundancy, and more. And then I also fixed any grammar mistakes I found. Alongside all that writing, I also worked on the backgrounds. And for this, I wanted to try something different. That something different is making 3D models as reference. The thing is, I don't really like drawing backgrounds. In a lot of cases, I really hate them, especially under time constraints. And for this game, I had planned to have a lot of backgrounds. Unfortunately, I would end up only using half of them due to time constraints. But hey, at least I got practice. So I began by going into Blender and modeling the house of the characters. I modeled every single room and it took several hours, starting with the layout of the house. I then went to the individual rooms. I'm not exactly an interior designer and modeling a building isn't the most fun either. But I think it's more fun than the alternative. So I modeled the kitchen, dining room, and living room. Then onto the upstairs where I modeled bathrooms, closets, bedrooms, and hallways. A lot of these didn't end up in the full game though. Then I also modeled the front of the exterior for an illustration, as well as some additional locations for other backgrounds and CGs. And once I was done modeling and taking screenshots of the rooms, I brought those screenshots into my drawing software. I basically just traced over them and added some values. I'm not sure if the overall process was faster, but the drawing portion was definitely faster than just drawing the backgrounds from scratch. And I imagine that for a bigger visual novel or even a comic, it would save a lot of time in the long run. Week 3. In week 3, my goal was to implement the writing into the game engine and draw all the CG art. For those of you that don't know, CG stands for computer graphic, and it's basically just a fancy way of saying illustrations that appear in a game. For this game, I decided to use Ren'Py, which is a game engine I am pretty familiar with. It's pretty easy and simple to use and is made specifically for visual novels. If you want to try your hand at making visual novels, I highly recommend Ren'Py. Putting the script into the game was tedious, but not difficult. I already had most of the writing done. I just needed to convert it into a format that Ren'Py could understand. Before I did that, I went back to my character drawings and drew up all the expressions I thought they would need. That way, I saved myself the trouble of having to go back in later to add all the expressions. Instead, I could put everything in all at once. I also had to define the characters. Part of the code is reused from previous games, but there are some additions too. I did some other miscellaneous stuff as well, giving the characters temporary voices and adding in animations I also used in previous games. As for the CGs, I took the backgrounds I had already modeled in Blender and added in some character models that I had made around a year ago. This character model was made for fun and based on a separate character, so for it to fit with some of the characters in this game, I had to adjust a lot of the proportions. It wasn't perfect, but it would be good enough for what I needed. And due to how I set the model up, I could easily manipulate the proportions and pose. So although it looks a bit uncanny, I was able to get it all to look relatively how I wanted, take screenshots, and bring them into my drawing software. I resolved to draw 2 CGs a day because I ended up needing a lot. 2 CGs a day was difficult, but I managed to do it. Thanks to the 3D models, it went a lot faster than it would have without them. Week 4. And with that, all that was left was music, sound effects, and polish. For the music, there's not much to say except that it was extremely tedious. I believe that music is so important for a game, especially one that relies so much on atmosphere. And in my experience, good, free horror music is hard to find. So believe me when I say I spent several hours trying to find the perfect music for every part of the game. Eventually, I did find an artist that makes a lot of free, quality horror music, and I couldn't be happier that I found them. It's a similar deal with the sound effects. This literally took an entire day. I had so many sound effects, and a lot of them I had to make edits to in order to get them to sound just right. And don't get me started on actually putting the sound effects in the game. I had to make sure they fit properly, were loud enough, and sounded good enough with all of the other sounds. I also replaced the character voices with new ones. I did this the same way that I do with every other voice I make for my games, and that's by using my own voice. I basically make a bunch of random noises into a microphone with different tones and such, depending on what I think the character would sound like. Then I adjust things like the speed, pitch, and other stuff to get it to sound just right. Then I add it into Ren'Py using code that plays the sound on repeat while the character is speaking. Visually, I did a lot. Starting with the UI, I basically redid all of it, from the title screen to the text box to the pause screen. For the title screen, I decided to draw Amelia and Sheen, as they're the 2 most important characters in the story. I drew Sheen behind Amelia with smoke coming out of it to make it look more intimidating. and it was at that point that I decided on the name Bring Her Home for the game. I debated between this and several other names. It was hard to decide on one as they all were kind of equally okay. I decided on Bring Her Home because of an inside joke between me and my family, but also because I felt it fit. I've always liked the idea of vague titles for horror games that can lead to a few interpretations of what the game could be about. I think Bring Her Home works for this. Additionally, I drew a few more extra CGs and played around with the animation feature in Ren'Py. I never really took advantage of that feature before and regret it now because it's actually pretty amazing. I had a lot of fun playing around with values and making little custom animations that I could apply to the images in-game. It really helped me to make the scary moments even scarier. The last few things I did were less directly tied to the game, but important nonetheless. And those things were the game page and trailer. For the game page, I really wanted to make the most appealing page that I could, which is not something I really prioritized in my past games. I went all out on making art for every part of it, even the buttons. Not only does this look nice, but it also helps viewers get a good sense of what the game is going to be like before downloading or playing. As for the trailer, that's obviously a good way to get people interested in the game. Both of these were relatively new for me, so I had fun trying to do both. But with that, I was done. This was a wonderful experience, and I am very happy with the results. There were definitely some frustrating parts, but this was overall very fun. I didn't get to include a lot of the things I wanted to, such as branching routes, puzzles, and choices, but I still think the game is good. As of writing this, the reception towards the game has been amazing and very encouraging. I really want to make more of these kinds of games, but for now, I'm turning my attention back to my other projects. Now with renewed energy and motivation. If you haven't already played the game, it would mean a lot to me if you checked it out. I made it with my Creepydrasta audience in mind, but it's really for everyone interested. The game is free and playable in your browser, though I recommend you download it, as that version is more stable. If you do play it, feel free to give it a rating or leave a comment. This tells me that you enjoyed the game and tells itch.io to show the game to more people. The link to the game is in the description if you're interested. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing if you're interested in seeing more of my content. Take care and farewell.